Hello, so this is chapter 1, Building Confidence in the Craft. So if you did your reading for this chapter, you know that the craft is referring to public speaking. We will cover the celebrated and feared power of speech, freedom of speech, and the fear of public speaking. You'll also notice that there's a TED Talk, and I will post the TED Talk as well as some of the other speeches that are in this PowerPoint in your actual module. So be sure to listen and watch those speeches. The craft or art of public speaking. So throughout human history, public speaking has been regarded as a robust skill or a tool. And part of the reason why you are learning public speaking, and I'm assuming most of you are taking this class, not because you want to, but probably because you have to. And the reason for that is that learning the art or the craft of public speaking is necessary for pretty much any profession that you go into. Learning how to communicate well, learning how to construct a message to a specific target audience, learning how to organize your ideas, learning how to become comfortable in your own skin, being confident, sounding confident, all the delivery aspects that go along with nonverbal communication, eye contact, use of gesture, how you stand, and what that communicates about you. So we know that public speaking is essential to our ability to be able to advance within our professional careers and also within our personal lives and even social lives. So if you look at the right side of this slide, you'll see the ancient Greek orator. This is Gorgias, and he compared the exciting and fearful effects of a good speech to witchcraft. People 4th century BC thought that those who were good speakers had the ability to cast a spell on an audience. And you might even think that today, not literally witchcraft, but you might be thinking someone who has the ability to change the minds of perhaps a few people, a few hundred people, a few thousand people, millions of people have the gift of oratory, but it's not necessarily a gift. You might say that a person has educated themselves in the art of public speaking, but there's a lot more to it than just learning how to deliver a speech, so on and so forth. So there are a variety of different types of speeches, but if we look at some speeches that can inspire compassion, goodwill, and change for the better, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of my favorite public speakers ever. Very powerful speaker for so many reasons. John F. Kennedy is another one. You can think of speakers today that you have listened to that have compelled you or inspired you. And then there are speakers and speeches that have inspired fear and hatred. An example of that would be Hitler, and you will see one of Hitler's speeches, a portion of one of his speeches, to give you an idea as to how he was able to really just cast a spell on his entire audience of thousands. And Jim Jones, too, he would be another example of a speaker that could inspire fear and hatred in people. So these are the speeches, and you have to be sure that you watch and listen to these speeches. Speeches to inspire change, and then speeches to inspire hatred. So the first one, I've been to the mountaintop, is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final speech. The day after the speech, he was murdered. And it's a powerful speech. I want you, when you're listening to this speech and watching it, I want you to analyze it through the lens of this class. Not only what is he saying, what is the context of the message. Just to give you a little bit of background, he's talking to a group of sanitation workers, and I think this was in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was challenging them to boycott the organization and to do so in a way that could help them have greater work equality. So I'd like you to take a listen to that speech, and I would like you to look at some of the comparisons that he made. He was comparing some of what he was advocating to the Constitution of the United States, and that's going to play a role here in the next slide. And then the second speech, which is a speech to inspire change, is the final speech from the great dictator, and that is Charlie Chaplin. It is from his only film that had sound, and that was given in 1940 after Hitler shortly came to power. So I would like you to listen to that speech as well. Again, you want to analyze it through the lens of this particular class. So who is his audience? How is he trying to inspire change? What is his delivery style? So make sure that you watch that speech as well. And then there's the speech to inspire hatred. It is subtitled. So you can fast forward to about 3 minutes, 20 seconds or 3 minutes, 30 seconds. And this is Hitler giving a speech to the Nazi children. And this was in Nuremberg. I believe it was 1934. And he was trying to inspire loyalty from the Nazi youth, and how what I want you to do is I want you to look at how he was able to do that through his powerful rhetoric. One of the things in speech that we teach is ethics, and you're taking this class, so you're learning the how-tos of how to write a speech, how to persuade an audience, how to target your message, how to organize your main ideas. But you're also going to be considering your audience, and you're also going to be applying ethics. What is the motivation for giving this speech? What is your goal? And something that Hitler learned in Austria, how to use rhetoric to persuade audiences. He took classes, but this is where rhetoric speech can be dangerous, in the sense where if you don't learn it properly, you can use it for the wrong reasons. So in rhetoric, like I said, we always incorporate ethics into our speeches. So you would never want to give a speech to inspire hatred, because that is something that Isocrates would say is completely unethical. Isocrates said that public speaking is about the good person speaking well. And so we use the Greeks in this class, and typically in any speech class that you would take at a university or at a college, we use the Greeks really as a guide for how we structure our speeches and how we take ethics and our audience and our delivery into consideration. So remember what Isocrates said, it's about the good person speaking well. So moving on to the next slide, you're also taking this class because public speaking is fundamental to a democratic society. And I'm going to say that again. Public speaking, learning the art, the craft of public speaking, is fundamental to a democratic society. Taking a look at the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So public speaking hasn't really flourished much outside of democratic societies. And in fact, non-democratic cultures often fear the craft or the art of public speaking. You could look at totalitarian regimes. You could look at countries like Russia. If people speak out against the government, they are often imprisoned or fined very heavily. You can look at countries like China, where you're definitely not speaking out against the government. People will tell on you and you will be imprisoned, and who knows what will happen to you. The people there have suffered some of the greatest atrocities against humanity. So people, in a sense, are fearful to speak out. Another example of that would be North Korea. So people, again, are not learning the art of public speaking because you are taught one message, and that is what you have to believe. And even if you don't believe it, you have to say that you do. So if people are moved by speech, then they can be persuaded to do, think things, believe things, feel things that are contrary to the interest of those in power. So I have a video here too, and I'm going to include this video in this module as well. And it's the Hong Kong protest. So again, if you know your history, not really our history, but if you look at, historically speaking, at Hong Kong, the British had control over it, and I think, don't quote me, I think it was around 1997, then the power went over to China, but they allowed the people of Hong Kong to still kind of maintain their style of government, their democracy, their power of speech. And so recently, if you've been following the news media, there have been a number of protests. And one of the reasons was that fugitives were going to be extradited. There was a bill that was going to be passed. Fugitives were going to be extradited to China. And the Hong Kong people protested this. They said, we absolutely don't want them, because they don't want them to be extradited to China, because what they felt was going to happen, it was kind of like a slippery slope where they would say, okay, now you are going to be a criminal if you speak out against the government. So they thought it would be a slippery slope here, and they didn't want their people of Hong Kong to go to China because, again, China has been known to imprison people without trial, without a just or fair type of hearing. So they did not want that to happen. So that has since escalated, and now it's really become more about democracy and universal suffrage, the ability that they want to be able to keep the ability to govern themselves, and they don't want China to govern them. So if you look at the protest, it went from peaceful protest into violent protest. But my question to you is to when you watch this news video, to think about if you all of a sudden were told that your way of life, living in a democracy, was no longer allowed, your First Amendment right, you no longer were able to speak on things that you believe are important, and to have a contrary view of the government, or to have a contrary view of an important power. If you were told that, and then that changed automatically, kind of a little bit, not quite overnight, but that changed over time, what would you do? So what would you do? Moving on here to the fear of public speaking, there's two components. We have just general communication apprehension, and number two is speech anxiety. So communication apprehension is the fear we all have about we all have about verbal communication. You get a little bit of anxiety if you talk to someone that you haven't met before, you talk to a stranger, or you have to speak up in front of people that don't know you. So you might experience some communication apprehension. And speech anxiety is really specific to public speaking. So there's different types of apprehension and anxiety that we can experience. So what you want to do is try to utilize one of the strategies for managing your fear, because it's fear that we have. It's completely irrational, but you're completely normal if you have it, because most people do. But because we have this beautiful gift called the imagination, we imagine all of these things. We imagine what other people are thinking about us. We imagine that other people might be judging us. We imagine that we might look stupid. So we imagine all of these things. And then these thoughts trigger our feelings. And then that can trigger physiologically, it can activate, it's called the parasympathetic nervous system, so that you are in fight or flight mode. And it's fight, flight, or freeze, where you just freeze and you can't do anything. And maybe your breathing starts to become accelerated, your heartbeat starts to increase, you start to perspire, your your pupils will actually dilate because you're really focused in. So a little bit of anxiety can actually help you become a more dynamic speaker, so that's a good thing, but you just don't want it to overwhelm you. So when you are feeling overwhelmed, these are some of the strategies that you can utilize. The first one is cognitive restructuring. And that's taking your thoughts, the way you're looking at a situation, and trying to reframe it so that your thoughts are changed based on how you have reframed it. So for example, a real simple example would be, let's say your best friend all of a sudden tells you that they don't want to talk to you anymore, just leave them alone, and you just don't understand why, but they're not giving you an answer. And so they stop talking to you. So in your mind, you could be thinking, this person's a real jerk, or you could be thinking, what did I do wrong? Or you could be thinking, am I just, not a likable person? You could be thinking a lot of different thoughts. So what you could do is maybe restructure the way you're thinking about that situation. You may or may not be right, but you could reframe that, because what if that person actually was having a mental breakdown? Or what if something really tragic happened in their life and they just shut down and they just weren't able to communicate to you about it? They just had to take a time out from life. So you might change how you previously felt about that person or how you looked at that particular situation. So instead of being hurt or angry, you might actually be sympathetic or empathetic. So it's taking the situation, how you're looking at the situation, and just restructuring it. So for some people, if you look at having to deliver a speech, you might just say, look, really simply, this is going to help me in my professional career. I know I'm not going to die from delivering this speech. I know the audience is very supportive of me, and I'm here to learn, and I'm not going to be perfect, and that is totally okay. So I'm not saying you have to think that, but I'm saying you change the way you are looking at the speech situation. Think about an interview. That's something else. So the interview, a lot of times we worry, am I going to get the job? Am I going to say the right thing? And instead of playing that script, what you can do is say, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to show them who I am, and either they will like me or they will choose another person. And it may not be because they don't like me, and it might be because they don't like me, but I will be okay. So it's restructuring the way you were thinking about a situation. Another strategy that can be used to manage fear is visualization. And this is used quite often by athletes to literally visualize yourself performing or doing very well, to take that time, you're in solitude, you close your eyes, and you just visualize yourself making the basket. Or in this case, in speech class, you visualize yourself giving that entire speech. So if it's a 3 to 5 minute speech, you take that 3 minutes to visualize step by step the entire way your speech and the process of your speech. And what you do in a sense is you kind of trick the brain. So the brain then thinks, oh, I've already been here. I've already done that. I have nothing to worry about. So literally you're tricking the brain by visualizing that whole process of delivering your speech. So this really works well for some people. And some people you're like, forget it, I can't do it. So if that doesn't work for you, you can also try deep breathing. Now, deep breathing is something that literally can lower your blood pressure. It can literally lower your heart rate, your pulse rate. So deep breathing, what you want to do is make sure that you're sitting and you have good posture, shoulders are back. And so if you want to take a moment now, if you're sitting there at your desk and you're sitting in a chair, make sure that you're sitting up, really good posture, shoulders are back, belly is in slightly, and then you want to breathe through the nose. And as you're breathing through the nose, make sure that you're not breathing from the chest, but rather you're breathing from the belly. And as you inhale, the belly needs to lift and expand. And on the exhale, it needs to fall or contract. And most importantly is you want to make sure that the exhale is longer than the inhale. So what you're going to do, and you can do this here with me a couple of times, you're going to inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it, 1, 2, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you pretty much want to double it. So if you inhale for a count of 4, you want to exhale for a count of 8. And that helps to calm everything down. So again, if you're going for a job interview, in the car on the way to the interview, you can try this deep breathing exercise to really ground and center you. The next one is isometric holds, or literally exercise. So you can take, and you can do this again if you're sitting in your chair right now, take your palms, press them together, and you press as hard as you can. That's an isometric hold. That releases the cortisol. That's the stress response hormone in the body. Or you can take one muscle group, a quadricep. That's your front thigh. You can take that and then you can isolate it and then just hold it tight. Make sure that's tight, and then release it. Do the other thigh. Hold it tight, and then release it. Then you go to a fist and then the other fist. You can do your face and then you release it. So that's one thing that you can do to release that adrenaline really within the body. And then the other thing that you can do is literally exercise. So make sure you take a shower afterward, but you want to exercise to release that pent up energy that you're experiencing. So that's another way to manage your fear. Fake it until you become it. In the Dr. Amy Cuddy talk, she's going to talk to you about faking it until you become it. So it's not just fake it until you make it, it's fake it until you become it. So you literally, even when you are just petrified to give a speech and you're shaking in your shoes, you do it and you do it and you do it and you do it again until you actually become comfortable in your skin and confident to deliver a message to an audience. So you fake it until you become it. And even if you think you're like, I'm being fake, that's okay. You just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And eventually it will become natural for you. I do want to say that the fear, I've been doing this for 20 years and I love public speaking. I love it. But that doesn't mean that I am not fearful every time I get up to speak in front of an unfamiliar audience. I do have anxiety. I am naturally an introvert. I do get nervous, but I utilize these strategies to help manage my fear. And when I do it, I love it. For me, it's like an adrenaline rush, and it's taken me years to be able to feel this way from giving a speech. But believe me, the fear doesn't go away. But then you can use it, you can harness it to become a dynamic speaker. And that's what I've learned to do over time. I took public speaking at a community college in upstate New York years ago, many moons ago in the 90s. And I was so afraid. I would literally break out in hives and I would shake. If you told me then that I would be a speech teacher today, I would say you are a bold-faced liar. So if you do it enough, it can become second nature and you can become comfortable and you can actually enjoy it and it will serve you well. The other thing is to be prepared. I know a lot of people are self-proclaimed procrastinators. I get you. I am kind of one too. I have worked really hard not to be, and it has taken me a long time. But one of the most important things that you can do is to be prepared. Do not wait until the last minute to do something because that's going to increase your anxiety. So take the time, do your research, be prepared. Do not wait until the last minute because if you normally have speech anxiety, then you're really going to have it because you didn't take the time to prepare and to finally practice. Practice, practice, practice. Write your outline, practice many times with it, then write your note cards. You're allowed 2 note cards, and then practice with your note cards. And I promise you, that will make such a difference in your overall performance. And then this is the last slide. So this is Dr. Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are. Make sure that you watch this TED Talk. I think that you will find it extremely informative and extremely helpful as you progress throughout the course of the semester. I think a lot of you will be able to relate to this TED Talk. So this is all I have for chapter 1. And our next slideshow will be chapter 4.